The edge of fear, the planet of Veralia, was a strange and beautiful world. Its skies were painted in shades of gold and violet, and its two suns cast long, dancing shadows across the land. But at the heart of Veralia lay something that turned beauty into terror, a massive bottomless crack in the earth, known as the Forbidden Abyss. It stretched for miles, wider than any canyon on Earth, and deeper than the eye could see. The aliens of Veralia never went near it. They said the abyss was alive, whispering to those who got too close. They said anyone who tried to cross it was swallowed whole, never to return. For generations, the story of the abyss was told to every child. Stay away, the elders would warn, or the darkness will take you. It was not just a rule, it was a law of survival. Even the bravest alien warriors kept their distance. They believed the abyss was cursed, a wound in the planet that should never be touched. But one day, a stranger arrived on Veralia. He was not like them. He had only one heart, no shimmering scales, and no glowing eyes. His name was Captain Rylan, a human from Earth. He came not as an invader, but as an explorer. He wanted to learn, to see what others feared to see. When Rylan first heard about the abyss, he didn't feel fear. He felt curiosity. While the aliens avoided speaking about it, Rylan kept asking questions. What was at the bottom? Why had no one ever gone down? Was it truly dangerous or just a legend? The aliens didn't like his questions. They whispered that humans were reckless, that they didn't understand the dangers of Veralia. One evening, Rylan stood at a cliff, where the land dropped away into the abyss. The air here was different, cold, sharp and heavy. It carried with it a strange hum, like a low vibration deep beneath the surface. When he looked down, he saw nothing but darkness. It wasn't like looking into shadow, it was like looking into the existence itself. Somewhere far below, a faint, echoing sound drifted up, almost like a whisper. The hairs on his neck rose. But he didn't step back. Instead, he leaned. Closer behind him, a small group of aliens had gathered. Their eyes glowed faintly in the fading sunlight. They watched him with a mix of curiosity and alarm. One of them, an older alien named Vorak, spoke in a deep, gravelly voice. "Human, you should leave this place. It is not for you. It is not for anyone." Rylan didn't move. "What's down there?" he asked. Vorak's face darkened. "Nothing that should be found." But Rylan wasn't satisfied. He had been in dangerous places before, faced storms, wild beasts, and battlefields. Fear didn't make him turn away, it made him want to see. For himself, he noticed something strange about the aliens' fear. It wasn't just about danger, it was about something they didn't want to talk about. It was the kind of fear that hid secrets. That night, Rylan returned to the City of Glass, domes where the aliens lived. He sat in a quiet corner of the public archives, looking at old star maps and geological records. The abyss had been there for thousands of years. But something was odd. There were no real studies, no maps of its interior. It was as if someone had erased all information about it. And yet, ancient carvings showed strange shapes and glowing lights deep within. It was not just an empty hole, it was something more. The next morning, Rylan walked through the market. Whispers followed him. Some aliens stared at him with pity, others with amusement. They thought the human was foolish. They thought he would end up like all the others who dared to get too close. But Rylan didn't care. His mind was set. If the aliens wouldn't explore it, he would. By the time the suns began to set again, Rylan stood once more at the edge. The wind from the abyss rushed upward, cold and smelling faintly of metal and stone. He closed his eyes and listened. The hum was still there. But this time he could almost hear patterns in it, like a message in a language he didn't know. The crowd gathered again, watching silently. Some whispered that the human wouldn't last the night. Others, deep inside, wondered if he might actually survive. Rylan opened his eyes, staring into the darkness. The abyss seemed to stare back. And in that moment, he made his decision. He would go where no alien dared to go. Not because he wanted glory. Not because he wanted to prove himself. But because he needed to know the truth. And the truth was waiting in the darkness below. Asterisk. The warnings the next morning. The alien council summoned Rylan to the Great Hall. The hall was carved from black crystal, its walls reflecting faint streams of golden light from the twin suns. The elders sat on high stone seats, their long robes flowing like shadows across the floor. Their glowing eyes followed Rylan as he walked in. He felt their stares like a weight pressing against his back. At the center sat High Elder Vuruk, the same alien who had warned him before. Beside him were 6 other elders, each older than the mountains of Veralia. They were silent at first, their faces unreadable. Finally Vuruk spoke, his voice deep and heavy. Human, you stand at the edge of something that should never be touched. Rylan didn't flinch. I only want to understand, he said, his tone calm. You want to understand death? Another elder hissed. The abyss is not a place for questions. It is a place for endings. The words echoed across the hall, cold and final. The elders told him the stories in more detail this time. They spoke of the shadows beneath, things that lived in the dark. They described voices calling from the black, pulling wanderers toward the edge until they fell. Some claimed the abyss was bottomless. Others whispered it led to another place, a place not meant for mortal beings. One elder leaned forward, her long fingers curled like claws. There were those before you, she said. Warriors, hunters, explorers. They all thought they could conquer the abyss, and the abyss swallowed them. Her eyes narrowed. Do you think you are different? Rylan stood tall. I don't know, he said, but I intend to find out. A murmur passed through the council. Some looked angry, others simply tired. It was clear they would not convince him to stay away. Before he left, Vuruk stepped down from his seat. He walked close to Rylan, his towering form casting a shadow that swallowed the human completely. If you go there, you will not return, he said quietly. There is more in that darkness than you can fight, more than you can survive. His tone was not threatening, it was almost pleading. But Rylan's mind was set. He had faced alien warlords, stormed ice moons, and crossed radiation deserts. Fear was not enough to stop him. And he could sense something in the elders' voices, something they were hiding. It wasn't just danger they feared, it was the truth. Outside the hall, the alien streets were alive with whispers. News traveled fast on Veralia. By the time Rylan reached the market, everyone seemed to know. The human had defied the council. The human was going to the abyss. Children peeked from behind their parents, staring at him with wide eyes. Some traitors shook their heads, muttering that he was doomed. But there were a few, just a few, who watched him with curiosity. Maybe they wanted to know what lay at the bottom as much as he did. But they would never dare to go themselves. That night, Rylan sat in the small room the council had given him. He laid out his gear rope, lights, rations, weapons, and a small oxygen reserve. His hands moved with purpose, but his mind kept drifting back to the whispers he had heard near the edge. They hadn't felt random, they had felt intelligent, as if something in the abyss knew he was there and wanted him to come closer. A faint sound came from the window. When he looked out, he saw an alien standing in the shadows. She was younger than the elders, her scales a soft silver. Her eyes darted nervously as she stepped forward. You shouldn't go, she said, her voice low. They won't tell you everything, Rylan frowned. Then you should, glancing over her shoulder. There is a door at the bottom, she whispered, and it opens only for the living. Before he could ask more, she vanished into the dark streets, leaving only the echo of her words behind. The idea of a door at the bottom burned in his mind. What could be down there that needed a door? Who or what would build something in a place no one could reach? He didn't know, but he intended to find out. By morning, the decision was made. He would not wait any longer. If there was a secret hidden in the abyss, he would be the one to uncover it, and no warning, no matter how dire, would turn him away. The challenge. The morning sky over Veralia burned with the colors of fire and gold. 2 suns climbed slowly above the horizon, casting long, sharp shadows across the alien city. By now, Every street, every market stall, every hidden corner was filled with the same whisper. The human was going to the abyss. It was no longer just talk. Word had spread like wildfire. Raylan had defied the council. And now he was preparing for something no living being had ever returned from. Some aliens thought it was madness, others thought it was bravery. But everyone wanted to see it happen. In the training grounds near the city walls, a group of alien soldiers were sparring. They wore armor carved from black stone and carried long, curved weapons. One of them, a broad-shouldered warrior named Exer, spotted Rylan walking by. He laughed, a deep, rumbling sound. So human. I hear you're going to leap into the black, he said. Raylan didn't slow his steps. That's right, he replied. Exer smirked. And when you vanish, should I tell your people you died screaming? Raylan stopped and looked him in the eyes. I won't be screaming, he said. But tell me this, if I go, will you follow? The other soldiers froze. Exer's smirk vanished. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Everyone knew the answer. No alien had ever dared to set foot beyond the edge. Rylan's voice carried across the yard. That's what I thought, he said, and walked away. By midday, the story had reached the farthest corners of the city. Not only was the human going to the abyss, he had challenged one of the strongest alien warriors. And the warrior had refused. The tension in the air was thick. Even the wind seemed to move slower, as if the planet itself was waiting. Crowds began gathering near the great cliffs that marked the edge of the forbidden abyss. Some brought food and drink, settling in as if for a festival. Others stood in silence, their eyes fixed on the black line in the distance. As Raylan made his way through the city gates, the crowd parted to let him pass. He carried only a small pack, a coiled rope, and a long rifle slung over his shoulder. His steps were steady, his face calm, but inside, his thoughts raced, not with fear, but with focus. He replayed the silver-scaled alien's words in his mind. There is a door at the bottom, she had said. A door meant for the living. When he reached the cliff, wind roared up from the depths. It was colder than before, almost icy. The sound was not just a hum now, it was a pulse, a slow, deep rhythm. It felt alive like a heartbeat. He stepped closer to the edge, looking down into the endless black. From here, it didn't even seem like a hole in the ground. It felt like an opening into another world. Behind him, the alien crowd murmured. Some called out warnings, others simply watched. A young alien child shouted, "Don't go!" Raylan glanced back and gave the smallest of smiles. Then he returned his gaze to the abyss. Exer and his soldiers had arrived too. The warrior stood with his arms crossed, his face hard. Still planning to jump, human? He asked. Raylan didn't look at him. I don't plan to jump, he said. I plan to land. Gasps ran through the crowd. No one understood what he meant. But Raylan knew exactly what he was doing. He had trained his body for low gravity descents. He had climbed cliffs where a single mistake meant death. This was not a leap of madness. It was a calculated risk. He reached into his pack and pulled out a pair of reinforced climbing gloves. The metal hooks at the fingertips gleamed in the sunlight. He tightened the straps around his wrists and adjusted the rope on his harness. Everything was ready. There was no turning back now. The crowd fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Rylan stepped right to the very edge. One step forward and the world fell away into nothingness. For a brief moment, he closed his eyes, feeling the cold air rise from below. It wrapped around him like invisible hands. He could almost hear a voice in the dark calling his name, and then, without another word, he bent his knees. The muscles in his legs coiled like springs. The crowd held its breath. With a single, powerful push, the human leapt into the abyss. The world around him vanished into darkness, and Veralia had just witnessed the moment history would remember forever. The jump, the world above vanished the instant Raylan's boots left the edge. For a heartbeat, there was only the cold rush of air tearing past him. The wind screamed in his ears, a sound so loud it drowned out the gasps of the crowd far above. The light from Verilia's twin suns quickly faded, replaced by the endless swallowing black. He was falling into something that felt less like a hole and more like a mouth. His eyes scanned the walls racing past him. The rock was not smooth. It was carved. Strange alien symbols glowed faintly along the jagged stone, spiraling downward. In patterns no human mind could immediately understand. The markings pulsed with a faint blue light, as if alive. The deeper he fell, the stronger the pulse became. It almost matched the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Rylan reached for the rope. On his harness, the metal hooks on his gloves caught against a ledge, slowing his descent for a moment. Sparks burst in the darkness as metal scraped stone. He adjusted his angle, using his boots to kick away from protruding rocks. He had trained for freefall descents, but nothing in the galaxy felt like this. Here, the air seemed heavier, thicker, almost resisting him from far above. The crowd's view of him was gone. They saw only the swirling mist rising from the abyss. On the cliff's edge, Exer stood with his arms crossed, trying to hide the unease in his eyes. The elders said nothing, but their faces were tight with fear. Every second the human remained alive in that fall was a second their beliefs began to crack. Down below, the darkness shifted. It wasn't just an absence of light, it was moving. Shapes like living shadows slid across the walls. Rylan caught the faintest glimpse of something watching him from the depths. Two faint pinpricks of light, far below, like eyes waiting in the black. The rope hissed against his gloves as he slowed his speed. Finally, his boots hit something solid. It wasn't the bottom, at least. Not the real bottom. It was a wide circular platform jutting out from the wall. Smooth metal, covered in dust, and in the very center, a glowing pillar. He took a step toward it. But the moment his boot touched the platform, the air around him changed. The hum he'd heard from above was now louder, deeper, vibrating in his bones. It was no longer just a sound, it was a voice. It spoke in a language he didn't know, yet somehow felt. The words pressed into his mind like heavy rain against glass. He couldn't understand the meaning, but he understood the intent. It was a warning. The platform shuddered under his feet. From the shadows at the far edge, the first shape moved. It wasn't an alien, not a living creature at all. It was a machine, an ancient drone, its metal body covered in the same glowing patterns as the walls. It floated silently toward him, its head tilting as if studying him. Rylan's hand slid to the rifle slung on his back. The drone paused, as if sensing the weapon. Then, without a sound, its body split open, revealing a glowing sphere of energy. The hum rose in pitch. Another drone emerged from the darkness, and then another. Within seconds, the platform was no longer empty. Rylan knew he couldn't fight them all, not here, not now. But he also knew he hadn't come this far to climb back up empty-handed. He took a slow step toward the glowing pillar. The drones followed, but they didn't attack. It was as if they were herding him, guiding him toward it. When his hand touched the pillar, the world around him changed. The darkness vanished, replaced by a blinding flash of white light. He was no longer standing on the platform. He was somewhere else entirely. A vast chamber stretched before him, its walls lined with towering machines older than any civilization he knew, and at the far end, half hidden in shadow, a massive door. The voice in his head returned, clearer now. It spoke only 4 words. Only the living enter. The descent, the blinding white light faded, and the world returned to darkness. Rylan found himself standing once again on the metal platform, but something had changed. The air was heavier, warmer, and the hum in the abyss was now deeper. It no longer felt like a warning, it felt like a summons. The glowing pillar in the center dimmed slowly, its light retreating into thin lines that crawled across the platform like veins of fire. These lines extended toward a narrow bridge that stretched away from the ledge and vanished into the darkness. The bridge had no rails, no walls, just a path suspended over nothing. Each step Rylan took echoed unnaturally, as if the sound was swallowed and repeated by the abyss itself. The mist rose in slow curls around him. It glowed faintly in the same blue tone as the markings on the walls. Through the mist, shapes moved, shadows without bodies. They slid along the edges of his vision, always disappearing when he tried to look directly at them. Every instinct in his body told him he wasn't alone. Something was following him. Halfway across the bridge, the hum changed. It became faster, like a heartbeat under strain. From below, a cold wind rose and wrapped around him. The mist thickened, hiding the abyss's walls from view. It felt like walking through a dream, except this dream could kill him. He kept moving forward. The bridge ended at a jagged opening in the rock. Beyond it lay a tunnel, its ceiling so high it vanished into darkness. Strange metal vines twisted along the walls, pulsing faintly with light. The floor beneath his boots was smooth, too smooth to be natural. This wasn't just a cave, this was built. As he moved deeper, the tunnel began to slope downward. Gravity seemed heavier here, each step dragging at his legs. The hum turned into a low vibration that rattled in his chest. It was no longer coming from the walls, it was coming from beneath them. Something massive was sleeping in the depths. The air grew warmer, almost humid. The blue glow of the markings brightened, revealing huge carvings along the tunnel walls. They weren't symbols, at least. Not entirely. They were images. Scenes of towering machines surrounded by alien figures. Scenes of a war fought not on land, but in the void of space, and in every image, the abyss itself appeared always at the center, always surrounded by light. Ryland paused to study them. The alien figures in the carvings were not Varelians. They had no scales, no glowing eyes. They were tall, thin, with elongated heads and 4 arms. Whatever they were, they had built this place long before the Varelians ever came here. The tunnel opened suddenly into a vast chamber. The ceiling was lost in darkness, but the walls curved upward like the inside of a colossal sphere. In the center of the chamber floated a massive structure, a ring of black metal, spinning slowly in the air without any visible support. Lightning-like arcs of blue energy pulsed across it. It was beautiful and dangerous. Ryland stepped closer. As he did, several of the shadow shapes from the mist began to emerge into clearer form. They weren't alive, but neither were they machines. They looked like silhouettes given shape, flickering between existence and nothing. One drifted close to him, its head tilting as if smelling the air. It made no sound, but he could feel the cold radiating from it. He didn't raise his rifle. Instead, he moved carefully toward the spinning ring. The hum was now a deep, steady rhythm, matching the energy pulses that rippled through the air. At the base of the ring was a platform of the same smooth metal as before. On it stood a tall object, wrapped in something like glass. Inside was a device small, but glowing with a light so bright it seemed to breathe. Ryland reached out. The moment his fingers touched the glass, the shadows around him froze. The hum stopped, and from somewhere deep within the abyss, a voice unlike any he had heard before spoke directly into his mind. "You should not have come," it said, slow and resonant. "But now that you are here, you cannot leave without seeing." The glass cracked, the light within flared, and the entire chamber began to shake. The revelation, the crack in the glass, spread like lightning. A thin, sharp sound echoed through the vast chamber. The shadows around Ryland began to move again, circling him slowly. Their shapes twisted and stretched, as if the light from the broken glass burned them. Yet they didn't attack, they waited. The hum of the abyss returned, but it was no longer the deep, steady rhythm from before. It was faster, urgent, almost desperate. Ryland stepped back as the glass shattered completely. The glowing device inside floated upward, spinning slowly in midair. It wasn't made of one single material. Its surface shifted between metal, crystal, and something like living tissue. It pulsed with energy, casting long shadows that danced across the curved walls. In that moment, Ryland understood something. This wasn't just a power source. It was alive, and it was looking at him. The voice returned, sharper now, cutting through his thoughts like a blade. "You are not of the builders," it said. You are not of the Varelians. Why do you seek what they feared? Raylan gritted his teeth. I want the truth, he said, his voice echoing in the chamber. Truth is not given, the voice replied. Truth is taken. The spinning ring above began to turn faster. Blue arcs of energy leapt from its surface to the walls. Striking the carved images, the stone burned away, revealing something underneath metal. The entire abyss, the entire structure, wasn't a natural formation at all. It was a machine the size of a mountain buried beneath the surface of the planet. The carvings had hidden a story the Varelians didn't want anyone to know. The builders, those tall, four-armed aliens from the carvings, had made the abyss. It was not a prison, it was a gateway. The light from the device brightened until it was almost blinding. In the glow, Raylan saw flashes images burned into his mind. Vast fleets of alien ships crossing through a swirling portal, worlds connected by thin threads of energy, and then war. Armies of shadow-like beings pouring out of the gateway, tearing through planets. The builders sealing the abyss with the device, trapping the enemy on the other side, and finally, silence. When the vision faded, Raylan staggered back. The truth was clear now. The Varelians hadn't avoided the abyss because of superstition. They avoided it because they knew what was on the other side. If the seal was broken, those shadows would return. The device drifted slowly toward him. You have touched the seal, the voice said. It will know you now, Raylan frowned. It? The hunger, the voice whispered. The thing that waits beyond the gate. A deep vibration rolled through the chamber. The shadows that had circled him before suddenly pulled back, melting into the mist. Far below the platform, something massive moved. The darkness seemed to thicken. It wasn't just a void anymore, it was something alive, watching him from beneath. The voice faded, replaced by a sound like metal tearing. The spinning ring began to crack, sending sparks of energy into the air. Raylan grabbed the device, its surface hot against his skin. The moment he touched it, the floor trembled violently. From the far side of the chamber, a huge section of wall collapsed, revealing a tunnel that sloped upward. It wasn't the way he had come in, but it was a way out. Behind him, the hum of the abyss turned into a roar. He didn't look back. He knew that if he did, he might see the thing the builders had feared. And some truths were better left unseen. He ran for the tunnel, the device clutched tightly in his hands. Each step shook under the force of the abyss's awakening. The mist poured in around him, but this time it didn't try to slow him. It felt almost afraid. At last he reached the mouth of the tunnel and burst into open air. It wasn't the surface, not yet, but it was higher than he had been before. Somewhere above, faintly, he could hear the distant murmur of the alien crowd. They had no idea that history was about to change. The tunnel sloped upward in a slow spiral. Raylan's boots pounded against the smooth metal floor, each step echoing in the hollow dark. The artifact's glow lit the way, casting shifting blue shadows on the curved walls behind him. The roar of the abyss was fading, but not dying. It sounded like something enormous was moving far below, something that had been asleep for a very long time. The air grew colder as he climbed. The mist was gone now, replaced by sharp, dry currents of wind. Every breath burned his lungs, but he didn't slow down. Somewhere far above, the faint hum of voices grew louder. He was close to the surface. Finally, the tunnel opened into a wide shaft, a rope ladder hung from the edge high above, swaying gently in the wind. Raylan grabbed the ladder and began to climb, the artifact strapped securely to his chest. The twin sun's light grew brighter with each rung, until at last he pulled himself over the edge. The moment his boots touched solid ground, the crowd erupted. Hundreds of aliens had gathered at the cliff's edge, their glowing eyes wide with shock. They had expected to see him vanish forever. Instead, he stood before them, breathing hard, dust coating his clothes, and in his hands, the impossible, a relic from the depths no one had ever returned from. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some whispered in awe, others in fear. High Elder Vorak pushed through the gathering, his gaze locked on the glowing device. "You should not have taken that," he said, his voice low but sharp. Rylan didn't flinch. "You've been guarding a secret," he said, "not a curse." The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Rylan stepped forward, placing the device on the ground between them. "This isn't a hole in the ground," he said. "It's a gateway, and whatever is on the other side isn't gone." A heavy silence fell over the cliffside. The alien soldiers shifted uneasily, their hands tightening on their weapons. Some of the younger aliens leaned forward, curiosity bright in their eyes. They wanted to know what he had seen, but Rylan didn't tell them everything. Some things would only bring panic. Vorak's expression darkened. "You have done what no one else could," he admitted. "But you may have brought something back with you." At those words, Rylan's grip on the artifact tightened for a moment, because deep inside, he already knew it was true. The wind rose suddenly, colder than before. It swept through the crowd, carrying with it a faint, almost unnoticeable sound. It was a hum, slow and steady, like a heartbeat. But it wasn't coming from the artifact. It was coming from the abyss behind them. Rylan turned to look, and for just a moment, he thought he saw movement deep in the mist, not the swirling of air. Something larger, something rising. The crowd didn't see it. They were too focused on the human who had returned from the impossible. Some began to cheer. Others simply stared in stunned silence. But Rylan's eyes stayed on the darkness, and the darkness was looking back. Vorak stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Rylan could hear. "If it follows, we cannot stop it," he said. Rylan nodded slowly. "Then we'll have to be ready." The alien council moved to take the artifact, but Rylan didn't let it go. "I'm keeping it," he said simply. "It's safer with me." The elders didn't argue. Perhaps they knew the truth if the hunger was waking. One warrior willing to face the abyss might be the only chance they had. The twin suns began to sink in the sky, casting long shadows over the cliff. The crowd slowly dispersed, though many kept looking back at him. Rylan stood at the edge once more, the cold wind tugging at his jacket. The abyss waited silently below. For now, but deep within its heart, something had stirred, and it would not sleep forever.